since the general election has been published this morning. It predicts that the Tories may face a 1997-style electoral wipeout.
Well, joining us now for more on this is the pollster and Professor of Politics, Matt Goodwin. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, could you just explain for everyone why this poll is different from the sort of weekly polls we might used to be sort of normally seeing? Why this multi-level regression and post-stratification analysis is perhaps a little bit more detailed?
Yeah, good afternoon, Tom. It's good to be with you. So the MRP is a really fashionable, dare I say it, sexy method in polling at the moment. You have a very large sample size, lots more voters in the poll, and then it's a much more complicated statistical technique, which crucially has a very good track record of predicting what happens in elections. Now, there is an argument, Tom, that this far out from an election, which of course could be at the end of this year, not necessarily over the next month or two, that MRPs aren't quite as powerful as they might be a month out from an election. But nonetheless, as you know, better than most, we've also had those by-elections where we know the polling is translating to what we're seeing on the ground when people are turning out to vote. So if I was Rishi Sunak looking at this and looking at those by-elections and looking at all the data in the whole, I would be very, very concerned.
Matt, now accompanying this poll in The Telegraph today is some analysis that suggests immigration is the issue that is leading to the Conservatives' downfall and will be reflected in the election results if something doesn't change dramatically. Would you concur with that? And also, I don't know if you've seen Onward's report on immigration, suggesting not only that people believe immigration is actually far lower than it actually is, but that 9 in 10 constituencies want it to be cut.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing to say is if you ask those 2019 Conservative voters, the people who basically Rishi Sunak needs to win back if he's going to have any chance at the election, and remember, about a third of those voters are currently saying they're not going to vote at all, well, their top priority is stopping the boats, above even the cost of living crisis. So that's why Team Sunak are throwing everything at the Rwanda bill. It's why they're throwing everything at the migration issue, at least illegal migration issue. The second thing to say about that Onward polling, look, what's interesting, and I've written about this this week in my Substack, that it's only now that British voters are beginning to realise what has happened with migration and what happened under Boris Johnson in particular. It's only now that voters are finally beginning to realise that net migration has rocketed to a record high, 700,000 a year, and the borders are broken. Now, we're all in the world of politics, right? We always debate these issues. We're always in the mix. So this isn't really news to us. But out there, in the voters that I talk to in focus groups who aren't really tuning in to the same extent as some of us, they think that immigration was coming down after Brexit. They think we've got control of the borders. They don't think that net migration has rocketed to these big highs. So the Onward polling for me is really interesting because if voters are now beginning to realise the extent to which immigration is now out of control, that is also really, really bad news for Rishi Sunak. It suggests he's really going to struggle to win them over after 14 years of Conservatives essentially presiding over this large-scale migration.
Now, famously, it's always said that a week is a long time in politics. We might have 6, 7, 8, 9 months until the general election, heaven forfend. What could the Prime Minister do to turn things around? Can he turn things around?
Okay, so here's his best chance in my mind. Number one, the Rwanda bill goes through Parliament. It's tightened up. The Robert Jenricks, the Suella Bravermans win the argument. They get their key amendments through. The bill becomes basically a much more effective piece of legislation. That then will go to the Lords. We're unlikely to see this bill coming into action and the planes taking off before the election, but nonetheless, it allows Rishi Sunak to say, look, I've got an oven-ready migration bill here. Do you want to help me put this through, or do you want to go and take a punt on Labour? That's point one. Point two, inflation and interest rates need to keep coming down, because that allows Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt to say, we're over the worst, the economy is improving. And point three, he really needs to run a seriously energetic, motivational, inspiring general election campaign that can get those 1 in 3 2019 Conservatives who, remember, Tom, are saying it's not that they're going to go to Labour, they're just not going to vote at all. He's got to get them off the sofa into the polling stations. Now, if he can do that, all of those things, the polls will narrow, and they will narrow. We're not going to see these 20-point Labour leads at the election. We're going to see, I suspect, a Labour lead of somewhere between 10 and 15 points. But Sunak is going to have to squeeze all of these things at the same time and hope the reform vote begins to get squeezed too in order to even have a chance. But as I say, I give them a 5% chance, Tom. That's it. It's a 5% chance. And if you know probabilities, you'll know I'm basically saying, they don't really have much of a chance at all.
Although that's what the New York Times gave Donald Trump in 2016, so never say never.
Yeah.